Correct.
I'd like to call the first meeting of the City Council Governance Committee to order. Welcome everyone to this first meeting and welcome to those who are on Zoom. As far as roll call goes, Councilor Tabor,
Present.
Councilor Lombardi,
Here.
we're all present. Introduction of committee members and advisory staff is the next order of business. Our council members have already stated that they're present, but I would ask them to introduce themselves and their interest in governance.
Okay, I'll start. I'm Councilor John Tabor, my second term. I participated in a number of committees over the years and I look forward to our comprehensive review so that we make the government run better and more efficiently, find needs that maybe aren't met, find committees that aren't serving needs, revise, find committees that and boards or other public bodies that can better serve their mission, change how they work.
And I'm Vincent Lombardi, City Councilor, my first term here, and I can't say much more than what John just said, other than that I've seen that there are issues at times where the ordinances could be improved, and so that's what I am.
And we work on
And yeah.
Good morning, councilors. Deputy City Manager, Deputy City Attorney Suzanne Woodland and I are here. We're pleased to be here to be resources to the committee, to be conduits for information and to understand what it is you need from us as resources, active participants in this discussion. Thank you.
She said it all. I'm good.
Can I get a motion to suspend the rules to allow for nomination of chair?
So moved.
second.
All in favor? Let's entertain a motion to appoint a chair.
I would like to nominate Kate as the chair.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so the decision is noted. The first real order of business for us is to look at our chart of work from given to us by the City Council, which I've given everyone a packet of all the several items, including council rules, policies, ordinances, lists of committees, administrative code, specifically the city charter. But on the first page, you'll find the chart of work, which really comes out of the motion that was passed by the City Council. And it basically, the governance committee is to be convened for the purpose of reviewing the city charter, council ordinances, council rules, and council policy, which will be required to report back to the City Council on committee progress and any recommended alterations to those documents. In furtherance, the governance committee shall consist of 3 members of the City Council appointed by the mayor with approval of the City Council. As a priority, the governance committee shall review the ethics ordinance, land use board appointment process, and city committee structure, and any other urgent governance matter that comes to the attention of the committee or is referred to the City Council committee. So that is our current chart of work, which we can it's pretty all encompassing. and it could be years of work. So therefore, there are some priorities outlined in that chart of work. And those priority items were the ethics ordinance, land use board appointment process, and city committee structure. You'll notice toward the end. And then the city council has already tasked us with review of Rule 43B to allow for their flexibility. Rule 41, addressed by the public to the governance committee for report back to the city council was exactly what the report back said. And reviewing the proposed charter amendment made by Councilor Denton, the June 24th city council meeting. And the process for charter amendments is also outlined in the packet. It's given to us by city attorney Bob Sullivan. So those are the actions, the requested action items and the priority items in the chart of work. Are there any questions about those so far?
Those were my questions, actually. What the process and priorities should be.
Why don't we move on to a discussion of community priorities then? I would love to hear from everyone here. What we think our community priorities should be in light of what we've been charged with so far.
Well, the public comment, public dialogue question. Resolve early burden in our work. That's an ongoing issue for our council. Likewise, Rule 41. And certainly the priority items in chart of work need to be good to tackle. The ethics ordinance, having been through that process and seen its flaws, actually, the four of us on the ethics committee at the time. This is a wonderful place where we pick up where we left off on that. City committee structure, I think, deeper dive that will take more time. And reflecting over the weekend, I thought, how do we get any engagement, particularly on charter? For us to just make recommendations without.
Well, I would agree with that. I think there's some issues with the land use ordinances that need to be addressed. But I basically agree with those priorities that you said.
I think I'm in a similar position, and I think that we do need to address the requested actions from council. And like Councilor Tabor suggested, the charter amendment recommendation may be something that we want to ask for more public input on. I think that anytime we have charter ordinance recommendations in general, we probably need to get an idea, a robust idea from public on direction, because those will, is my understanding, require quite a bit of public support to move forward. And as far as priority items, I think that the ethics ordinance is something we probably need to address. Since the council went through that process and Councilor Tabor has that experience going through that process, I think it will be important for us to reflect on Councilor Taylor's experience and experience with the community, and potentially bring in additional parties who were part of that process, and get their reflections as well, going through any revision to the ethics ordinance. And I agree, committee structure might take some time to go through to determine what is the best appropriate committee structure. I would love to hear from the city manager or the deputy city manager thoughts with regard to any of these issues that we're discussing now, the requested actions and priority items in the charter work, and things that you have, if you've noted that we're potentially missing.
I have not been, I have not collected a list of things that we've noted on our end, but I'm happy to start that. Suzanne has a list, so let's turn to Suzanne. Thank goodness.
So let me just say that I think it sounds like you're honing in on the first priorities, as delegated by the council. And those all, sound consistent with what you've been hearing and seeing, and kind of grabbing some stuff while it's fresh and timely and jumping on that. And then I would concur in terms of that, charter amendment conversations. I think the reason why the city manager and I are here are part to help you set up public hearings or otherwise decide how you might like to gather input. And then we could help make that happen at the appropriate times. She says, looking to make sure there's no one hanging out in the waiting room. So I think that, all sounds good in terms of where you're headed. I think just for your information, know that staff has identified a number of areas where we expect sometime in the next 2 years during this cycle that we'd like to be coming forward probably with some ordinance changes. And I think it would be helpful to know whether this committee would like to see some of those here first, or whether you prefer to have us just take those through the normal process. And if you want, I can just flag some of the items that are on our list that we're working on. This is kind of slow, we've got a lot to do. So what we see, potentially coming down the pike, and I'm leaving aside all the zoning related issues because those are, you've got that other committee specifically looking at that piece. So these are mostly the non-housing zoning issues. So first off, actually, with some overlap, housing code. We don't actually have a robust housing code. And the new chief building inspector is interested in, because he has experience with housing codes in other municipalities and how we might be able to implement and bring forward a housing code to make it easier to enforce when we have, say, landlords who are not keeping up a housing residential situation in a manner that is conducive to its residents and safe and healthy. So that's something that we're working on. You probably heard, you certainly may have heard Councilor Tabor from prior times that we would like to be bringing forward a new updated sewer use ordinance. It would be a big piece of work. It's been on my desk, so to speak, for the entire 18 years I've been here, and it was even in the works before me. Because it's complicated, it will require a lot of dedication and time. It would include more regulation on probably fats, oil, and grease, as well as industrial users. Because when our new permits are issued by the EPA, we will have to adopt a formal industrial user program. We have an informal system now of permits. So those are two big ones. In addition, as you may know, Dover is looking at a stormwater utility, and we expect, sometime in the near term to be bringing forward to the city council kind of a memorandum describing our stormwater master planning, and then ways to fund the work that would need to be, done for stormwater work work, and that would include the possibility of adopting a stormwater utility. Purchasing ordinance probably needs a little bit of a cleanup as things have changed in terms of how people actually get notice of, you know, opportunities to bid and participate in the city's purchasing department. And then we have a variety of, you know, frankly, the parking ordinance, we've been meaning to clean up for some time. It's also on our list. We've already identified a couple of other issues. We have some cleanup with the water ordinance. You know, as we put that into place a couple of years ago, we just noticed some things that we probably are ready to adjust, so small changes. So we have begun a couple other items, but just know that we've begun to look forward. Some things have been in the works for a long time, and then some other pieces with the opportunity of this committee to maybe help knock off and frame up some of the smaller things that just need some good housekeeping that, you know, we're looking forward to working with it. So that's kind of a preview of some of the things that we've got coming in the pipeline, hopefully, from an ordinance perspective.
There is a thing that I've been concerned about, and I think there's potential of this being more and more of an issue, and that is demolition permit review and process. Right now, there's basically very little one can do about a couple of things. One is demolition by neglect, and also just straight coming in and demolishing a existing property just to build something new.
Thank you, Counselor. I kind of envision this committee working to some degree with a few other committees as well, especially when we're dealing with ordinances around issues like housing code and parking, and because we have other motion committees that address those specific issues. I think it would not be unreasonable, and I don't know if this has been done on a regular basis, for someone from this committee to go, if we referred something out to another committee or to work on that ordinance. I think it would be reasonable for somebody to go and present our concerns and have them then report back to us what they think the recommendation should be. And then this committee could look at that final ordinance recommendation and bring it to the council in conjunction with, say, a new housing or a new community dealing with zoning. And we're dealing with parking traffic safety. And for things like demolition. Because I imagine that is part of one of the tasks for the new committee task with land use. That could be something that they can also address. So I would love to know if that has been done.
Yes, it's certainly the case that committees have either worked jointly or created a working group, you know, one member from one committee and one member for another, to kind of tee something up and bring it to both. So I've seen it done a variety of different ways, depending on who's going to do the laboring work and how you want the communication to flow. But certainly done because there are natural intersections between, for example, demolition and housing and the other work that's going to be done by the committee that is going to be headed by Beth Moreau. So, indeed, yes.
I have a question around conflict of interest. In order to avoid right to know violations, since there are 3 counselors here, we just have to make sure that we don't have an additional counselor serving in those discussions to avoid that, or because it goes there and it comes back here, does it not matter? So,
You're right to be concerned about creating a public meeting when you're only a body of 3. So generally it would be, I would assume, one of you going to parking, traffic, and safety, for example, and discussing, for example, a parking, overhaul or rewrite of the parking ordinance. that being said, we can certainly notice up, parking, traffic and safety is meeting and there might be a quorum of this committee, we would notice that as potential quorum. And then you attend, but we put the public on notice that you're there together. So there are ways to handle that.
Right, administratively, we'll worry about that on our end.
Thank you. So, Council Chamber,
Oh. It's a good list that we just heard. I'm wondering how we would deal with something that's more purely administrative in nature. Like water.
So
Obviously, the council has to finally approve some ordinance that's changed. But I'm thinking if it's streamlining the city manager that you want to do purely administrative function, maybe that's just something that goes straight.
and that was sort of my question, whether there were expectations here that you wanted to see everything that we bring forward, or whether, for the stuff that is primarily staff driven going forward, because you obviously have a full agenda, or when we get closer, we touch base and say, hey, we're getting ready. Do you want a preview of it here in this venue before we, bring it forward to the full city council?
The answer to that question might be a function of the cadence of the meeting of this group. So maybe if there are administrative things we look to take advantage of or look to move on in between meetings, or something that is purely really administrative, we could be noticed on the agenda that way. Maybe things that the staff is looking to do and run by it.
as far as priorities of work, when I look through everything this committee is tasked with, clearly city council rules falls to this committee, city council policies falls to the committee. Once we get to city council ordinances, I think that is really a split task. Administrative code, a lot of the administrative code, which I included in your packet, would fall, I think, to the governance committee. There's also additional code that I did not include, because I thought it was already quite a bit, around things like boards and the code of ethics I did include, but I did not include. I did not include everything because I didn't think it was logical. I actually really did include most of everything. I did, but some of the things that we don't need to address likely as the governance committee, things around licenses, unless there's a referral, specific referral from city council. And issues around vehicles, traffic, parking, I'm guessing we could have a role in that, but we don't really need to address that yet. So it's kind of, fire prevention rules, it's unlikely. But it's nice to know just the breadth of the ordinance, but to know that we do have limited tasks, and that's why we should probably set clear priorities, starting. One of the things that I consider a priority is looking at city council rules, because the city council just adopted those rules with some recommendations around a few that we definitely need to look at. We probably should go through them all anyway, because those recommended changes were changes based upon current practice, and changes that our legal department felt needed to be changed to reflect current practice, but that doesn't mean that it's the practice that we want. So I think probably those rules are a priority. Some of the ordinances are outdated and should be reviewed soon, because they limit our ability to act in certain areas. Specifically, I've noticed around public art acquisition. They're organizations today that don't even exist in some of these ordinances. So that's one of those reasons that we should probably take that. Or not ordinances, sorry, policies. Let me get all the language. Confused here, sorry if I confused anyone. City council policies. Clearly, we need to update those things if they reflect current practice. We do need to address land use appointment process because that did come up. We have some challenges around that came up with the last council and the number of appointments. It's inconsistent between the number of people that have to be appointed in a given year and the number of people that the mayor's allowed to appoint. So we need to address kind of that conflict in our own code.
And things of the terms.
Exactly. So we need to make some recommendations around appointments in ways that we can fix it, which is going to require conversations with legal counsel, but also probably conversations with the Secretary of State's office or the Attorney General's office around RSAs and stipulations around the RSAs.
Keep in mind that sometimes you will have legal opinions that vary, and that only subsequently gets worked out in the court system. So it is infrequent, but it does happen that your in-house legal department will have a difference of opinion from the Attorney General's office or from the New Hampshire Municipal Association, and they do not overrule us. So it really, the final arbiter is the court system. So that's why you will occasionally hear differences of opinion, and why typically if one reaches out to NHMA or Attorney General's office, we consider it advisory. And the Secretary of State's office is pretty narrow. It's election law. So generally, they're not land use board focused.
Yes, I'm thinking we have to address election, if we're gonna look at election law, those charter and have some input and other departments for assisting us with that. So with that said, I would propose that we start with the initial recommendation, requested action for council, aside from the charter amendment. Within the rules, but let's make that more all encompassing. So we review all the rules, but take a very close look at 43B and 41. And that we start the process of looking at the ethics ordinance. And maybe ask the legal department to start looking at options on land use board appointment process.
Take that back.
Does it make sense?
Well, I think we would be smart to give people some guidance on the outcome. I know for myself, I was concerned that an outgoing council would put a significant number of appointees in place on the land use board. And I think my feeling was that that should be preserved in income administration. Whether that's done by having the land use terms expire in January, or whether that's done by having the appointments be the right of the new incoming council. But I think we saw a situation where, as I spoke at the time, had a block of 5 council who had lost election, but felt it was their duty to put appointees in place. And I want to think about that. The precious We all work for the voters. And if the voters have expressed the direction that they want, shouldn't that new council, the expression of that new desire for the direction of the city? Against those. So that would be my feeling. If you feel that way, maybe we would ask legal to come up with a way.
Yeah, I think that's good.
So I'm seeing nodding, so I should take as a work product back is to get some input from legal in terms of options for the appointment process in the scenario that we're talking about,
Yes.
that you guys could consider and reflect on.
And is it best to adjust end dates and terms? Is it best to require appointments occur after the terms expire? Which, or is it important? Would it make the most sense to do those things and also rebalance? I have a question about rebalancing terms so that we have a healthier rotation of terms on our boards.
Right, staggering of terms.
Yes.
Or does a new city council take office in November?
Well, to the extent you're looking at changing an ordinance, i.e. that planning board section, that's obviously relatively easy to do with 3 readings. So I think when we report back from the legal department, we'll make sure we focus on that piece, but then if you want to go into the charter piece, I think that can be flagged, but I want to be careful that you keep the 2 separate, given that you've got very different processes for each. Would that be helpful to make sure we kind of keep them
Right, because
clearly separate?
at this point, we're just talking in very broad brush strokes. Well, for the public discussion.
We'll take that back as a report back for the next. Well, I guess it depends when your next meeting was.
Exactly. I would love if we can at the next meeting to address rules and also address ethics, the 2 main items that we look at in the next meeting. And then maybe have a report back on land use, we can defer discussion on that to the next meeting if that works for everyone. Having said that, I think it would be important for us to divide tasks around rules, so that not one person is reviewing everything, or a few people take on, one person takes on rules, another person takes on ethics, another person takes on other tasks. Does that make sense to everyone? Does anyone have a preference on what they would like to work on?
Well, I'm happy to work on that.
Okay. There's a lot more rules. But I'll work on them.
I'm happy to work on rules as well. Do we want to each, Councilor Marty, do you want to take one of those recommended rules, like 43.1, and I'll take the other one?
Yeah, we can do that. I mean, I think we have to go through all the rules.
Yes, exactly. But we should probably address
Those 2 first.
definitively, yes. 43B is public dialogue,
Yeah,
and
there's 41.
yes, addressed by the public.
Mhm.
So similar. Or you could choose to take those 2 to look at, or I could take those 2. The other person could look at the rest of the rules, which do not have major changes. There are some changes for the council as well. And I should note that the rules that you have in your packet were the red line versions presented at the last council meeting. We did not actually adopt all of these.
Okay.
Yes, the change to, Rule 7 was not adopted. There just wasn't we don't have a clean copy yet up on the website. So this,
I thought that
Actually,
was.
Rule 7 was adopted.
Was
The
it
amendment was to not, keep it the way it was drafted and the amendment failed.
oh, okay, I'm sorry, it was adopted.
It is still red line, but it's accurate.
It is accurate, sorry.
That's okay, it was a confusing set of
Yes.
circumstances.
Exactly. So it was adopted.
But still can be reviewed.
Of course.
Exactly. The changes to 41 were not.
Right,
So,
and 43. 43B, I guess it is.
yes. 43.
Do you want to take those two and I'll go through the others?
I'm fine with that.
And if I have any, obviously I'll read them too and think about them, but. And if you have any input on the others,
That sounds wonderful.
do we have to work in isolation?
Because you're only 3 members, 2 is a quorum. So the answer to that would be yes, although you're happy to talk to staff,
Okay,
Karen or me. Or legal.
okay.
So that would get us to work for next month or next meeting. That said, we've already heard issues, basic issues identified by staff. Are there any other issues identified by staff that we should address immediately?
I know you flagged the policies related to public art. And I apologize if you've already had conversations with, Nancy Farmer and others about the process. So you're nodding yes, good,
Yes.
okay. I just didn't know if you needed more information or input from staff on that point on how we see that potentially evolving.
Are we talking about percentage for art?
Not the ordinance, but how one would implement the ordinance, but obviously it's related,
The policy related to public art.
yeah,
Right.
Since our speech is pretty much dissolved,
Exactly.
right.
Yeah.
There's
one body decides how to put the art, what art.
exactly, and we have another mechanism to address that, when it's the percentage for capital improvements.
Right.
So, the question is do we take that mechanism and use it? Is it the most appropriate mechanism? How do we reform this? I'm happy to look at, all of the top policies around art. There's also a public art referral policy as well. Because I also sit on the Arts and Nonprofits Committee. So I'm happy to have conversations with people there and with staff on public art, which I've already started having those conversations.
That's what I'm kind of asking, yeah.
Yes, and I'm happy to look at those and report back to the committee.
And I would suggest reach out as much as you need to us, and we can facilitate if you need another conversation with Nancy Farmer. I know I was involved in some of the art acquisitions, the art process early on, so you're pick my brain in terms of what worked well and what was more challenging. I think
Where
that's
is that?
kind of what option.
City council policies. There is a 2014-02 public art referral. And then the other ordinance is further down, art acquisition, 2009-06. It's public art acquisition policy. Those were ones that just immediately jumped out because he doesn't exist, and his name in the policy. So, while the policy may have been a good one, we could likely retain a lot of the general idea around it. We probably need to have it. Review. Is there anything else that we should be looking at rather quickly?
We've got a good list for now.
Yeah.
Pretty good list. All right.
We get begs the question, do we want to be twice a month, once a month?
I think that's a reasonable question.
Or with energy. That's deliverable by the end of the year, not included. Since we have some deeper dive. All the. What's that? But we will, I don't want to make it too much work.
Yeah,
So, can I say, when I asked the mayor, we were discussing, he was going to make appointments, I said, just please appoint people who are willing to put in a lot of work. Because I know how much work it's going to take to go through all of these things, it's just a lot of work, it's a review process and additional outside discussions, I'm sure that, getting the input you need from the legal department. So I do think it's reasonable to meet every other week or twice a month. I don't know if you want to do twice a month or every 2 weeks. Either way, it's reasonable. I kind of like every, instead of saying twice a month, maybe
yeah, I kind of like the idea of twice a month.
twice a month.
And less so in the summer.
Okay, that's fine. We will work around people vacation pretty well. I think that's reasonable. But I think it probably will take a little time, especially during the beginning, just to get through everything to make sure we've done a basic review, and then some of the issues are clearly.
Well, I think if we moved at a good pace for the priority items, that would build confidence.
Is there any other business?
Well, so you want to talk about a schedule? I mean, is
Yes.
this time in Monday at 10? Whatever week it is, I guess, third week, first week or something like that. Maybe opposite weeks from council meetings.
Right, which this appears to be, and that way, if you wanted to put something under your name to bring forward to the council, you'd be in a position to do that.
That makes sense. So we want to look at their calendars. I think it's reasonable to think that would work.
So
We'll do that first and then we'll go to public comment.
proposing Monday, Feb 28th, 10 a.m.
Yes. So February 28th, March 14th, I already know I have a conference that day, March. But I can likely meet via Zoom. That shouldn't be a problem. I can join via Zoom.
As long as you have 2 in person, you'll meet your quorum requirement for physical in place. Yes, it's just every vote will be by roll call with you.
I am out of town.
That leaves me.
And I'm back the 28th. So the 28th would be fine as far as I'm
And I
concerned.
can join.
If you can you join present, well, ask you to do
What day is it now?
the 28th of March.
Oh. Okay. But we are meeting on the 28th of February.
On the 28th of February, then March the 14th, which I'll be joining via Zoom. March the 28th,
Sorry, which was the first one?
March the 14th. Does that work? Okay. And then March the 28th, April the 11th. And then April the 25th, it looks like.
That's school vacation week, but I'm not sure it impacts anybody.
No,
Okay.
my vacation week is that March, so it's
As long as you're.
March the 14th, date, not my first school vacation.
Okay, it's on the
Trial.
I guess.
So,
Yes, April 25th. And then we get to May, we have city council the 2nd and the 9th.
We have a lot of meetings in May.
And then, I don't know if we want to,
Might want to back off.
right,
Let's take stock of where we are, maybe.
right, so maybe we would hold it on your calendars like May the 16th. So that we would skip the 16th and the 30th. The 30th is Memorial Day though, so. We will likely have to schedule a different date. We do that. But maybe we should just hold May the 16th. For May, and then once we get to June.
when we revisit it, we can see what we do.
Okay. Let's do that. And so we have a general schedule, 10 a.m. on Mondays. The next meeting is February the 28th. And with that, we can go to public comment. Is there anyone who wants to speak in public?
Hi, Doug Roberts. I'm not seeing how to raise my hand here. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're on.
So what would be the best way for people to bring issues to your attention?
I can put, answer the question. I think bringing them to the attention of the committee by public comment is probably the best way to bring issues to the committee's attention.
Okay. Well, our group, as you must know, is filed suit against the city, but we will be withdrawing that suit later today with the agreement of the city of Portsmouth to allow us to withdraw without prejudice. So if some unusual occurrence happens, we can refile. You know, we hope we've made our point. We have the expectation that you will do good work, and hopefully you will address some of the issues that we have raised and hope to raise in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I'll bring Ken Goldman. Go ahead, Ken.
Okay, thank you. I'm really excited that you set up this committee. I think you're doing important stuff, and I'm glad to see that we have 3 city councilors and city manager there. That's really a good start. Unfortunately, probably due to your masks, the sound quality hasn't been the best. So I'm trying to understand a little bit how your charter works. I mean, you was talking about teaming with parking and traffic safety on parking issues, and I think that's important. What about other things such as outdoor dining? How does the governance committee fit in with that? Thanks.
In the city answer?
Do you want to answer about that?
I'm thinking of the best way to respond, Ken. We are due to report back to the council at the next regular meeting, which is February 22nd. And what we are doing now is compiling a list of issues and a bit of a timeline and to help walk the new council through what we've learned in the last 2 years with this expanded program. And we will be putting a report in the packet. The timing is interesting in that we are participating in a chamber collaborative Zoom session on Friday. And I'm thinking out loud about whether it's appropriate to put a placeholder memo in the packet, but what I think I'd rather do is put a late breaking, here's what we learned at the Friday meeting memo in the packet. So it's as comprehensive as it can be. So I guess it's a long way to say, Ken, if you have matters you'd like the council to consider, it's before them as a whole next Monday night. And I would look for anyone to chime in other than that.
And I would also add that the governance committee would address that if it was referred to us by the city council.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure, it's a good example of it's so timely that I think we're looking to stand this up the day after the meeting. So it would be as helpful as possible to get comments in through the form mail, which I know you're familiar with, and that's a good thing.
Okay, thank you very much.
If I could make another comment.
Yes, thank you.
As a group, we would make a suggestion that you consider strengthening Rule 2 so that it is crystal clear what is supposed to happen at special meetings. For instance, adopting some of the language of the Parliamentary Authority Roberts rules that say, everything needs to be included, including them with specificity, the motions. That would be one thing. Another, which I've not discussed with my co-complainants, so it's just an issue that I would raise. In the last election, not all political action groups complied with the city ordinance on registering as required by the city ordinance and disclosing any contributions, total contributions, and so forth. And the city clerk has a letter from the New Hampshire Attorney General that to Mark Brighton that notes this. And so the committee and the council might think about enforcement mechanisms. And finally, when counselors come on, I don't remember as a former counselor whether or not there was a session on the right to know law, but that might be something that new counselors could get. For instance, I did not, until I got involved in this, I was not consciously aware that if you're in a meeting where you feel a right to know violation is taking place, that you should object, and therefore you personally will not be subject to any penalties that might occur, and you can formally go on the record. I was told that if you object, an attorney told me that if you object, it would be unlikely, even if it's not in the formal process, that you would be sanctioned by the court. But this is sort of detail that new counselors might be made aware of, so that there's more sensitivity to right to know issues in public meetings. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? If we have no other public comment, and we've already discussed the schedule of meetings, I will take, yes.
Just as a follow on to Doug Roberts, we might be smart also to think about rules around motions in non-public session. Want to have votes in non-public session as opposed to voting in debate. As opposed to voting and debating in public.
Thank you. I will take these comments and concerns and make sure that we have them written up so that things that we can address as a committee, at our next meeting.
Just procedurally, I know I took some notes on the premise that we have to do some minutes. So I don't know if you took note, I mean, I took notes if you want me to draft and send the draft to you, Chair, or what your preference is.
That would be wonderful if you would draft.
And I'll let you then kind of fill in places that.
That's perfect. Thank you. Is there any other business? Great, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Return.
Thank you for doing this.